When is a good time to get into gold and silver? Well, there's no time like the present. And if you watch our interviews, that's what our leading analysts and experts are telling us, because this gold rally is not going away anytime soon. Reach out to us at ITM Trading. You can book a Calendly appointment with one of our analysts who will walk you through building a foolproof strategy centered around owning gold and silver, physical gold and silver. Make your Calendly appointment today. Now let's get to our interview. Hi, everyone. Daniela Cambone here, and welcome back to the Daniela Cambone Show on ITM Trading. Joined today by really one of the greatest leaders in the gold and mining sector, Rob McEwen, the founder of Goldcorp, where he took the company from a market capitalization of 50 million to over 8 billion, and now at the helm of McEwen Mining, where he owns a 16% stake of the company and famously takes a salary of just $1 a year. The cost of his investment in MUX and McEwen Copper is now at 225 million. We're going to talk about McEwen Mining, McEwen Copper, his latest venture, copper in Argentina. It's the hottest topic right now. Rob, so good to see you after a little bit of a hiatus here. Really, really happy to have you back on.
I'm very happy to be here, Daniela, and to see you.
Yeah, like I said, want to talk gold, want to talk dollar, want to talk the economy, and of course, copper. But I thought it would be fun to go back in time a little bit here, Rob, because I've interviewed you for years now. I think the first time was probably back in 2009, and I dug up some old footage when I was doing research for this interview, and I found an interview we had done at the PDAC in Toronto, the world's largest mining conference, in 2010, where I famously asked you, Rob, gold was about $1,200, I think, an ounce at the time. I said, Rob, where's gold headed? And you looked to me and said, Daniela, that's an easy one. It's going to 2,000. So that was 2010. So you were right. We hit 2000. It took a few more years to get there, but we did. So my question to you is, where are we going now?
Higher. We're at 2,500 and we're going to go to 5,000 at a minimum. Now, it might take a couple of years, but there's too much money in the system. There's a lot of debt, and governments continue to be irresponsible in the way they print money. So they're debasing currencies, and then you have the BRIC nations, Brazil, Russia, Iran, China, getting out of dollars and disrupting the payment system in the world, bringing a new one in. And it's taking a lot of the pressure off the dollar. So you could see a weakening of the dollar and gold going up and other commodity prices going up as a result of that.
Looking back at all the experts I've interviewed, Rob, you were really one of the first to talk about our purchasing power declining. And this is going back to 2010. And you've kind of been pounding the table saying the dollar's just going to get weaker and weaker. And you were saying at a time when people really thought that was just crazy talk, just like $2,000 gold was crazy talk. So I'd like to dig a little deeper, and you famously pulled out that, what is it, $1 million Zimbabwe note?
Yes. Billion. That's when I became a billionaire.
So what cycle are we in when we look at the US dollar? What part of the cycle are we in right now? If we look at, this is the end game, demise of the dollar. Where are we?
There's been enormous money spent during COVID to try to prop up the economy. And now there's a war on a number of fronts. So there's large military expenditures. You have an election coming up shortly, so there's a lot of propping up of the economy through they're trying to look at get the rates down, but I think it's going to be hard to keep the rates down for any length of time. And um, we're just people are wondering about all the debt that's outstanding, over $35 trillion, say in America. How are you going to service that at these higher interest rates? And that's usually the usual course of action, and has been for governments to print more money to debase the currency to pay off the debt in cheaper dollars. And that's not just America, but it's in Europe, it's in Canada, and many other places in the world. Even China's doing that now. So
You mentioned the Fed, and as you know, Jackson Hole just concluded. A very dovish Powell. What's your take? Is he powerless right now or too powerful?
I think circumstances will overtake his ability to control where he wants to go. There's too much out there, um, too much monetary stimulation has occurred, and too much debt has been incurred. Um, so it's coming along, and it's going to come along and bite everyone.
And bite everyone.
Yes.
How so?
Well, I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, I went to the Monaco boat show. They have some very big boats there for sale. And the prices are huge. And I was asking the broker that was taking me around, said, how do people pay for these? I mean, do they pay cash? I mean, this is a discretionary investment. And he said, no, most of the people buy it on credit. I went, well, how much leverage could you get? And they said, oh, 90%, up to 90%. And I'm going, 90%. I mean, there were boats going for well over 100 million euros. And I thought, you get 90% financing. What happens when all of a sudden you bought a boat with a crew of 20 people and your financing costs go from close to zero to 5, 6, 7%? And we've seen that in the real estate market, gross speculation there, the stock market in certain areas. It's just the system gets overburdened and starts collapsing. And that's when people look to hard assets to protect the wealth they've accumulated.
Gold.
Gold's one of them, yes.
And what do you feel this gold price rally is telling us? I mean, I've seen one quote, I believe it was Jim Rickards, who said, it's telling us more about the dollar than it is about gold. I thought that was telling. What do you make of the rally here?
There seems to be, I mean, there are forces at work, it appears, to try to hold it back, but it's pushing hard to go through and stay above 2,500. And as we go into the fall, there is a seasonality to the price of gold and many commodities. The fall is usually an active period for price of gold. Active being a higher environment, and then you'll get it slowing down around the holiday season and then picking up again in the early part of the new year.
I read an interesting op-ed, and there's been many discussions had on whether, even at the political level, of whether the dollar should go back to being backed by gold. Are you an advocate of that?
Yes, it would help. I mean, the BRIC nations are trying to achieve that, and to take and create a currency or currencies backed by gold that would be an alternative to the dollar. It's going to take a while, but they're not going to be buying treasuries as much. China was the biggest buyer of treasuries. With the sanctions that have been put on by Biden, they're saying, well, we're not going to buy it. You've seen the petrodollar disappear. Saudi's saying, well, we'll take other currencies to buy our oil. It's taking the pressure off the dollar. And you wonder who's going to buy the treasuries if you have sanctions against China, Russia, other areas that used to have those dollars in large quantities in their treasury, part of their foreign reserves. It's just, and you also saw the banking system change. The SWIFT system used to deal with all the international transfers of money. They've come up with their own banking system to circumvent the sanctions that have been placed on them by the government. So you're entering into an environment that I think is going to become much more volatile with respect to currencies. And that will also reflect in the gold price.
Are you alluding to a currency reset?
Um,
A
I don't know.
monetary reset?
Yeah, I don't know if the government's got to that point yet, the Federal Reserve, but huh? Well, you always fear that something like 33 happens where they just say you can't own gold anymore. You have to have the currency, the land. Um, yeah, devaluations could be forced upon us by weaker currencies.
What's your response when people say, well, Rob, look at the state, people are talking about the Eurozone dying. Look at what's happening in Great Britain, Canada. Is the
Hmm.
US just still the best of the bunch? And that's what just will keep it going.
Well, it has the broadest circulation. It's been the historic place since the end of the Second World War. It's been the go-to currency. Um, there's some competitors appearing, some alternatives that are starting to appear on the world scene. How quickly they will become viable, or will they be an alternative to the dollar, is a big question. But certainly the need to have dollars to buy the biggest expenditure in an economy, and that is energy, has shifted. It's no longer just the dollar. And that has very big ramifications down the road, I suspect.
What are your thoughts on Bitcoin being a possible, future of money? What's your take on Bitcoin?
Bitcoin came out of nowhere, it seemed. It surprised the government. Government didn't do anything. Governments didn't do anything about it for quite a while, and now they're used to controlling currencies. Um, and this is one that was out of their control. So they're going to somehow either have their own so that it would displace Bitcoin and the other ones and with their own, or somehow shut it down. But for the moment, it's a way of people moving money around without the entanglement you get when you try to do it normally.
Rob, you've obviously done, very, very well. So people usually want to know, what does Rob? You invest in your companies. You invest in yourself. You're fully invested in your companies. But you mentioned the S&P before, and I'm just curious, what's your take? Because we'll often hear, well, those gold folks, they've been telling us not to be in the S&P, that it's gonna burst. Um, Angry that they missed out on gains on the S&P, waiting for commodities to take off. What do you say to them?
Read history. I think Ray Dalio's done a good job of summarizing what's happened across time. There are a number of other books, but Ray's the most current. Um, and so during inflationary periods, which I'd say we're in, um, you want to get into assets that can appreciate. And the stock market is one of those areas. In wildly inflationary environments, the stock market runs. Um, so along with gold. So maybe we should have said, the gold bug should have said, well, you could have some stocks too, but you should buy gold.
Do you think it's interesting how, we often say, well, the rate cuts will be better for gold, but gold has been rallying, in a high dollar context, a rising rate environment. Were you surprised that gold's done well despite all, the context, the environment that it's living in, that it shouldn't have done well?
Oh no, I look at the global, the geopolitical tensions that are in the world, and they're not isolated to one place, but they're in many places. The monetary expansion, the growth of debt, corporate, government, personal, um, it's just setting the scene for gold to move. And also, when you look at interest rates, I go back to the late 70s, and interest rates were climbing, and gold was going up, and it wasn't until Paul Volcker imposed about a 20% interest rate that it snapped the back of the run on gold. Now, gold went up to $850 an ounce then from $35 in the beginning of the 70s. So I can see high interest rates and gold together.
I want to talk about critical minerals now because you have this is your next real venture here, Rob. Well, let's talk about what you're doing with copper. Well, first of all, let's first define what a critical mineral metal means.
All right, go to it.
Vital to the economy and to national security,
That's pretty critical.
right?
Yes.
Pretty critical. Talk to me about why you see critical minerals as being so vital and important for the next 20, 30 years or more.
From kindergarten forward, everybody has been taught that mining is bad. It degrades the environment. That's one side of the story. The other side of the story is that what's come out of the ground has facilitated the growth of the modern civilization and supports our lifestyle. So in that way, a lot of minerals are critical. Um, if you were to take mining out of the equation, I'd say we go backwards. And I gave a speech in New York, and it said, become a nudist, stop mining. Um, but you're looking at what do we need. Copper is certainly used for conveying electricity in modern construction, for electrical engines, thinking about the transition, the energy transition, the large servers, computer servers that will be powering AI, that do power AI, and all of the work we're doing in cryptocurrencies and all of that are all part of that equation of critical minerals. What's disrupted or what's made critical minerals critical is the geopolitical tensions that are going around the world. They've disrupted the global trade patterns to such a degree that the former areas, a number of sources of supply, are no longer considered secure. So it's inboarding and saying, well, where do we have to find new sources of these minerals that are essential for running our civilization today, for allowing us to defend the nation and our economy. So that's a big thing.
Before we talk more about your project in Argentina, then what do you make? I mean, we understand, okay, critical minerals are vital, right? What do you
Mm-hmm.
make of Canada banning China from investing in Canadian critical mineral projects to secure our own transition?
Part of it is a concern that those assets get out of our control. Um, Canada needs uh, foreign capital to develop a lot of our resources. Um, so in some ways, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. If mining is one of the highest paying industries in the country and a huge source of export revenue that props up the dollar. Um, I I go down to Argentina frequently, and I used to come back until the most recent government came in, feeling that Canada was going in the direction of Argentina, where
Hmm.
lots of devaluation, lots of inflation. Um, so I looked at that and I said, that's the wrong direction to go, but that's where our government seems to be taking us. And then more recently, I was in the Middle East and I was in Saudi, Qatar, Abu Dhabi, and there were some things that were very noticeable. There was no litter on the streets, there was no graffiti, there was no crime, there was no homelessness. There was economies that appear to be prospering, amazing architecture, and all of that was based on natural resources that they were harvesting. And I'm thinking, why isn't that Canada? Well, we have a rich, rich country in natural resources, and the mining industry has moved a long way from the historical picture most people have in their minds. But if we started developing our resources, we could be improving the standard of living for all Canadians, improving the value of our dollar immensely so that maybe we're on par or at a premium even to the dollar, the US dollar. And I just said,
Wouldn't that be nice?
wouldn't it be nice? Yeah. I just think
Hey,
you wander around, and I mean, the cost of everything has gone through the roof, partly because there's less discretionary income because of carbon taxes. And we're not a huge polluter in the world, um, and they've cut off a lot of our natural resource development. So we don't have the same export revenues, and our dollar's shrinking, and we're spending lots of money outside the country rather than inside the country.
exactly. It really leaves you scratching your head. I mean, I mentioned the fact ban China from investing in Canadian critical minerals, yet our Canadian pension funds, Rob, as you know, are heavily invested in China with almost nothing in Canadian investments. And now we're adding tariffs to zero carbon EVs, which consumers will pay for. So, like I said, it really just leaves you baffled
Yes,
how we're
yes.
not investing, I'm speaking as a Canadian, um, in ourselves here.
I couldn't agree more, Daniela. We have this large bounty and we're not realizing on it. And we're
So,
discouraging investment in the mining space by creating all sorts of obstacles and delays, uh, even for our own. And you were mentioning our pension funds have gone outside, and you have to say, well, why aren't they investing domestically? And they're probably just saying, well, we can't get the returns we get offshore.
so talk to me about Argentina now. First and foremost, your take on what Milei has done for the country. I mean, we've seen the inflation numbers there, and also what he's done for mining.
Um, when Milei was out there campaigning to be elected, he was an image I have in my mind of I saw him. He had a chainsaw in his hand. He's
Hmm.
brandishing it on stage, and he's saying, "I'm going to cut out the bureaucracy." And I said, "That's my guy. I'm a libertarian by heart and political conviction." But you have a fellow who's a trained economist. He worked in private enterprise for one of the richer guys in Argentina. He was a television personality. He was in a rock group. He's speaking a language to the youth. And I think it was the youth that put him in power, that elected him. Um, and they were saying, look, we're fed up with the guys that have been in power for a long time. They've messed up this economy royally. We want to change. Um, He's a political outsider. Most people that I talked to before the election gave him very low odds of getting elected. Then when he got elected, they said, "Oh, he wants to pass this very um, dramatic legislation through that is contrary to the Peronists who've been in power for a long time. He's not going to get it through. It went through the lower house. Well, he's not going to get it through the Senate. He's not going to get it approved by the provincial governors. Well, they started seeing that he was on the world stage talking in very logical terms, and they started saying, hey, that's the winning team. We better get behind it because we'll be left out in the cold. And so he's gotten everything approved. About 2 months ago, I had met with him for an hour in Buenos Aires in his office, and
Wow.
we went over um, what he was hoping to do in the economy to attract foreign capital. And we discussed, stability agreements and tax rates. Uh, and he said, well, we might not get it through the first time, but we're going to keep pushing. He said, even though inflation rate is high right now, I'm working to get it down. The best way to get it down is creating higher paying jobs and getting more foreign capital in. Um, and he said, even though inflation is high, and it wasn't my problem, um, it's my popularity's gone up. Now we have to see. I mean, inflation was running close to 200% on an annual basis down there, but he's moving ahead, and I guess they introduced the laws. They've gone through all levels of the government, and the first manifestation of that policy is BHP cutting a deal with Lundin and for over $4 billion to develop two copper projects that happen to be in the same province as our Los Azules project.
Los Azules, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And I think you're going to see more of that. We just did a deal with YPF, one of the large power companies down there, and it's a memo of understanding, but they will provide us all the power we need, and it'll all be coming from renewable sources, wind, hydro, solar, and they'll do the design and the financing of that power line. And that is speaking volumes about their confidence in the emergence of Argentina as a major copper producer.
well, you just, like you said, the return of, BHP to Argentina. I mean, massive news. I mean, was there anything, I mean, I know you've spoken with many world leaders, Rob. In your meeting with Milei, I mean, did you really get that sense compared to other world leaders that he gets the importance of mining, that he wants to make it a friendly jurisdiction to do business?
Oh, yes, yes. And not only for mining, for all segments of the economy. But he appreciates that mining is one of the, if you look at the economic multiplier of industries, mining's one of the highest economic multipliers. So every dollar you put in, there's $1.70 to $2 or more of economic value created in the economy. The service sector is much smaller. Manufacturing and real estate development are also very large. So if you can encourage money coming in mining, I know the Chamber of Commerce of Hydrocarbons in Argentina, when he first came out with this program, they said, we'll be putting tens of billions of dollars into the development of the hydrocarbon resources if this gets passed. For us, I mean, he's dropping the tax rate from 35% to 25%, a 30-year stability agreement, removing the exchange controls that are currently there that have prevented people from taking profits out of the country and dividends, and a whole bunch of other measures that make it a much more attractive environment to invest in.
So 1.2 billion ton deposit. It is set to achieve carbon neutrality by 2038 and is expected to have the lowest water consumption of any copper mine in Argentina. Some pretty ambitious goals here. I mean, what's your vision here, Rob, with Los Azules?
It'll be bigger than Goldcorp. It's when I look at deposits that aren't gold, because of my background in gold, I turn them into a gold equivalent. So we have measured and indicated and inferred resources totaling 37.6 billion pounds of copper. If I go and say, let's take the gold price, divide it by the price of copper, and arrive at the number of pounds of copper that would equal the value of 1 ounce of gold.
Mm-hmm.
And I divide that number, which right now is around 600 pounds of copper is equal to an ounce of gold, into the 37.6 billion pounds, I get a gold equivalent deposit of over 60 million ounces. I apply that same factor to our cost of production that we've been forecasting of $1.02 a pound. That gives a gold equivalent cost of just over $600 an ounce, and the all-in sustaining cost would be just under $1,000. And it has a life of 27 years, and that's only mining 40% of what we've drilled off. In my book, a 60 million ounce deposit producing just shy of 700,000 ounces a year for 27 years at those costs is a pretty good gold deposit. It rivals anything that's in Nevada. It's almost as much gold as the Timmins district has produced over the last 100 years. So you're talking 75% gross margins. And we brought in, I don't want to tear apart the earth, we brought in an architect 2 years ago who was considered the Steve Jobs of the green living building space, and said, I asked him to come in and sit down with our mining engineers and our management team and say, help us redefine mining. Mining has a bad reputation with the general public. Mm-hmm. Can we change it? And that's what we set out to do. We have a wonderful 5-minute video on some of his renderings and our philosophies. But so you have a mine that it'll be a heap leach mine rather than a conventional mine. It uses less capital, definitely less water, quarter the water. It emits less carbon. It doesn't have a tailings dam that could threaten downstream water supplies, and it'll be producing green copper that doesn't have a cathode that doesn't have to go to a smelter, shipped far away, and so it can be used by industry right away. We've got our storm back.
I don't know why that's happening. Crazy. It's such a beautiful day here in Montreal. Rob, you bring up a really good point about the bad rap mining gets. And I understand, obviously, where a lot of it comes from. That said, one of the most remarkable experiences in my career was actually when I got to visit your mine in Mexico for McEwen Mining in Sinaloa. And I wish, as part of an education experience, I mean, most folks unfortunately don't have the experience of getting to visit a gold or silver site, firsthand. But the thing that I left with was the incredible sense of community. So how happy the people were that your company was there, that you were creating jobs, community, schools, mm-hmm. and how clean of an operation it was. And once the mine is done and used, your goals. I remember at the time, I don't remember how many years ago that was, but how you don't just, leave a hole in the earth and walk away. That you then create a beautiful park or whatever. But mining has come a long way, right? But unfortunately, most don't get to see that the good, the prosperity, and how it can change people's lives, the community's lives. I mean, does the mining industry have to do a better job of communicating this?
Yes, it goes beyond the mining. Well, the mining industry should be asking all of the groups that they buy services from to speak about the benefits of mining. they're dependent on it. Be like the law firms, the stock exchanges, the investment dealers, the suppliers to the industry. Um, because there are not a lot of spokesmen, people defending mining and saying, look, it really is critical to our modern life. And that's it. We're only told one side of the story to most people and not shown the other side. And there is, there's a historical legacy that people can point to. But I have to say, the mining industry has moved a long way from there and done a lot of science to protect the environment as much as possible. There are situations where it just doesn't work, like in many industries, there's problems. But I'd say the majority of them, the mining companies, are experiencing much better performance than people appreciate. And that, yes, to get to your point, that needs to be shown, but we need a louder voice. We need the people, the community that supports and the mining industry supports needs to be vocal as well. And they haven't been. I've been pushing our lawyers and accountants to say, hey, what are you doing? Look, we're paying millions of dollars to you people every year. Um, put a hole in your revenue stream if we disappeared all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of jobs that would disappear. Um, and there's secondary and tertiary industries that come out of that. There's technology that we can apply. Um, we are in our copper deposit, and I will get the video sent to you. It's a 5-minute video. I think you'll enjoy it. It tends to shock a lot of people, saying this could be a mine. But we are planning to have a hotel at the site where we have the mine.
Cool.
And it's a beautiful environment to my way of looking at it. It's in the mountains, in a rain shadow. You have these pastel colors cascading down the sides of the mountains, just minerals that's come out and to surface. You've got Inca trails not too far away. There's wildlife around there. Beautiful clear skies at night. You can reach up and touch the stars. It feels like it's really a place you want to protect and preserve. So we want to create a jewel on the side of the mountain. We are going to be digging a big hole, but eventually that'll be a source of water downstream. That'll be a large containment area.
Rob, how do you think the U.S. election plays out?
I hope Trump gets in. I think we need to have some definitive statements where the country is, and there are values that need to be reinforced that have been slipping. And we've introduced too much compromise, too much, if you want to call it woke, and we're losing the values that built the U.S. to be the strongest nation in the world and contributed to the freedom and an example for the rest of the world.
And what's your hope for Canada?
That the fellow who's currently in power, the two of them, don't get back in. I think we have a country that shouldn't be run by someone that was a part-time drama teacher, that claims they're unable to do math, that couldn't add 13 and 14 together. They have a problem doing that. And we have a very large economy, and they're very large decisions, and I see homeless people in almost every community I've been into across the country, and yet we're spending enormous amounts of money outside the country. Compassion, yes, but let's deal with the problems we have at home before and have a strong foundation before we go out to the rest of the world. I just feel that we're going on the wrong course.
I guess just to wrap here, Rob, people always, ask me, or they're so curious when I interview, people of your level of success, of what you do on a daily basis, they want to know the secret, like how does Rob balance it all? How does he manage? How do you handle it all?
Well, recreation. I like being outside in nature. Um, I'm an avid snow skier, water skier. Um, I like the arts. I like being busy outside. There are projects like building. I think if you had an epitaph, if I had an epitaph, it'd say strive to build. Um, and encouraging people. Um, there's some philanthropy. And my wife and I funded the establishment of the largest stem cell research center in Canada,
Yep.
thinking that that might help improve the delivery of healthcare down the road. And I think it's attracted funding from Bayer Pharmaceutical, and they're taking one of our projects forward, which injecting stem cells into a heart that's had a heart attack, and
Mm.
you get a scar tissue where the heart attack occurred, and the heart, as a pump, doesn't function as well. Um, they've been able to inject 1 billion stem cells in and grow muscle tissue where the scar tissue was, and the heart comes back to the way it should be functioning. So you could look at that as one day possibly replacing artificial hearts, heart transplants, um, which is one of the biggest killers. Um, there are educational programs for leadership um, where they teach them the fundamentals of accounting, fundraising, project management, and they end up spending time down at Disney's management school in their last year. It's a 4-year program through high school. And it's all about trying to give people the confidence to walk through a dark doorway,
Mm.
uh, which stops them from going in. But once they go through that doorway, you're into a place where there's not a lot of competition. So giving them the confidence to reach, to try, to build, um, create new leaders, to make country a better place in the future.
That's really incredible, wonderful, innovative um, things you're working on, Rob. I mean, anyone who's visited Toronto can see all the great things you have done for the city. Um, I guess just to wrap, I mean, I was just so happy to reconnect with you today and get your latest views on the world, the economy, BRICS, gold, copper. Just to wrap here, a lot of the folks watching are very concerned about the direction we're heading in with the economy, with politics, society. Just final thoughts here for people watching.
Yes. Um, we had some values that built our country, and we need to adhere to them. If you think of, well, you're in Montreal, they tore down the statue of McDonald. Um, I contacted the city of Montreal and said, could I buy the statue? And they said, no, we're not going to sell it. But,
Wow.
but I thought those statues were put up, and it's part of our history. And we shouldn't look to erase our history. There are lessons from that. But we've tolerated a new sense of, well, we're going to tear that down, or we're going to burn a church or something. Um, that's not going to solve the problem. And when you look at, say, the Taliban going around in Pakistan and or not Pakistan and Afghanistan, they were tearing down buildings, and then they went into Syria. They tore down ancient temples. They were trying to erase history. Hitler tried doing that too. And most dictators want to erase history and say that their way is what it's always been. And it hasn't. We have to look at what we've gone through. There may be lessons from that, but that's our history, and we have to acknowledge it. We can't erase it. And if we erase it, we run the parallel of throwing our world, into a great deal of confusion. And we want to come together rather than create all these different groups that are fighting for attention. And I think our government's done a really good job of dividing our country up into small little pieces that aren't working harmoniously together. And it has to stop.
The majority of this audience are big believers in gold, Rob, as you know. What role, and a lot of them feel empowered owning gold, up against what we're in, and they feel it's the ultimate, wealth preservation. What role, what does gold mean to you? I know it means so much, but if you had to summarize it.
I got exposed to gold through my father, and he was an investment dealer, and in the early 60s, he put all his clients into gold and gold shares. Gold was $35 an ounce. And so at the dining room table, there was always discussions of gold, the irresponsible nature of government over millennia to debase currencies, and always trying to buy votes. And you have to act as an independent of that to protect yourself. And gold serves as that protection. And there may be periods when it doesn't perform quite as well as you thought, but if you look back and see even 2007, 2008, gold was around $600 an ounce, and that was when the financial crisis was upon us. It's $2,500 today. It was $35 back in 1970. It doesn't seem to be slowing down its momentum, and you look at the BRIC nations, they're converting their dollars into gold right now, trading it. During the First and Second World War, Europe shipped their gold to the Federal Reserve in the United States. They shipped gold into Canada because they felt the Nazis were going to come along, invade, and if they invaded, they'd take the gold away. Because everybody else had paper currency, and if the country was overrun, it'd be worth nothing. Gold is accepted as a medium of exchange, a store of value that endures time, and it should be part of everyone's portfolio, some part of it.
On that note, Rob McEwen, it was so wonderful being with you today. Thank you for sharing your time with us.
It was a delight, Danielle. Wonderful to see you again.
Hope to see you in person soon.
Yes, I look forward to it. All the best.
All the best to you, Rob, and thank you all for watching. We'll have more great content coming your way, so be sure to stay tuned to the Daniela Cambone Show and sign up at danielacambone.com to stay on top of it all. Thanks for watching.